Welcome to this Reswell PTSD VUCA meeting. It's in cooperation with the Mental Wellness Society, and it's about becoming VUCA informed and identifying and managing psychology of VUCA in individual daily life. So Reswell is a group that we have created in cooperation with the Tel Aviv University. It says here top 40 top researcher, but now we are 52, 26 countries. And we meet once a month, and we work on VUCA, because since COVID, VUCA is very, very active. As we can say that it's a societal type of PTSD. Dr. Lebovits will speak more about it. And we see a lot of consequences of it, particularly for mild cognitive impairment, because all the population, not just in Israel, but worldwide, we start to see a big number of mild cognitive impairment on people at 40 years old, starting already at that age, to open their fridge and not to remember why they were going to the fridge. And there is a direct relation between VUCA and MCI, are saying our researcher. We have also the Mental Wellness Society, was created actually first week of COVID. And Dr. Leisman is one of the founders. Dr. Lebovits is a founder. I am a founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO. And Koti was planning to be with us tonight, but she had to be busy on a television show. So now it's very important because actually we grow. If you take the statistic of LinkedIn, we are 1,336,000 active members. That means people who come and go. But if we take the people who are constantly present, it's close to 140,000 people. And the figure you have here is for 2 weeks. So we have basically 4,000 members every month. We have 2,800 posts per month by the member, and we are close to over 5 million views per month. So the Mental Wellness Society is considered by LinkedIn as a unicorn, and we are the only group in mental wellness and resilience. As a result, we have been growing in other countries. We have now a chapter in UK with 6,000 members, and we have a chapter in Romania. The chapter in Romania is very active. I was there a week ago because there is a big conference over there. And there was a press conference, and we have 45 journalists on 3 TV. And definitely the Romanian groups is growing very strong, and we have a very strong group of the Mental Wellness Society in Romania. They organize an event with us, and there is more than 3,200 people participating. So it's pretty good number. So
human potential begins with two interconnected systems, the brain and the mind. When a better functioning brain meets a better thinking mind, awareness emerges. Technology can support us, but life happens outside the machine. The goal is not simply a healthier brain. The goal is not simply a better mind. The goal is a better life.
So that's the brain and mind axis that is definitely developing with us in Romania.
Human potential.
So now we have Dr. Lebovits. I will make him co-presenter. He's a founder, co-founder. He's the chair of the Mental Wellness Society. He's co-creator of the Mindful Choice Method, Mind Evoke Psychology Skill Icon. He is involved in the Mindful Young Mind curriculum on social emotional resilience, and is a former faculty of University of Pittsburgh, and more. So he will be now our speaker, and I will escape, and I will make him co-presenter. We want to go here. We want to have a full image. And now he is Dr. Lebovits, co-host. Now you can speak.
Thank you very much. I want to, let's see, let me share my copy PowerPoint. And I believe, let's see, there we are. Very good. Okay. Just as way of introduction, yes, my name is Dr. Robert Lebovits. I am a clinical consulting
We don't see your
psychologist.
screen.
You don't see my screen.
No,
I've
you need to do
shared it.
share.
I did.
can see it. Yeah, I can see it.
Do you see it?
No.
Yes.
Let's see. It says I'm sharing my screen.
Now we do. But you need to make full screen.
Okay.
Down, it's a little button. Down, you like a TV screen.
Okay,
Down,
yes.
down, down.
Yeah. Right.
Click.
Just 1 second. There we go.
Voilà. You will.
Okay. So let me just introduce myself a little bit. I am a clinical and consulting psychologist here in Pittsburgh. My specialty has been working with children, teens, and families. As Dr. Meyer said, he and I have been partners and working together on all of these creations for over 15 years. I have been, for about 25 years, I was a consultant to a foster care agency that did specialized foster care for children who were delinquent or dependent. For over 20 years, I taught at the University of Pittsburgh in the Department of Psychology, training graduate students in child and family therapy, as well as psychological assessment. And for a time, I was a consultant to the Allegheny County local family court system to do custody evaluations. So I've had quite a bit of experience working with kids. And most recently, I've been a consultant to an after-school program here in Pittsburgh for children at risk in a very depressed neighborhood where we tested and evaluated the Mindful Young Minds curriculum and found some very, very positive results. So that's by way of introduction. I assume I'm going to make the assumption that pretty much everybody here has some familiarity with VUCA, but just to cover my bases, the VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, plus hyperconnectivity. And VUCA conditions affect individuals psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, socially, and physically. So here's a question. Why is this important for mental health professionals? So of late, we have become cognizant of the need, for example, as mental health professionals, to be what's called trauma-informed, to be aware that traumas can have a profound effect on the mental disorders that people present, and we need to explore and identify what those traumas may have been to do a full job in working with clients. I want to postulate that VUCA is a comparable kind of trauma, although it is environmentally based. It's not necessarily internally based, but like any other trauma, it needs to be evaluated and treated in a way to understand the full impact on an individual so that we can treat individuals appropriately. And as you can see, people encounter VUCA from a variety of different vectors: economic instability, social media, health concerns, career uncertainties, family stressors. So those are the variety of ways that people encounter VUCA. Now, there are protective factors, and we will discuss them later, including resilience, adaptability, metacognitive awareness, emotional regulation, supportive relationships, and we'll discuss all of that as we go on. But this is a very important established foundation that VUCA is a fundamental for mental health professionals, and unfortunately, they don't know about it. And so we have to inform them, we have to train them. So let me tell you what we're going to do today. I am going to cover a number of issues. The first issue is we're going to go through the VUCA factors individually and then collectively to identify their psychological impact and how they present in real life. Next, we're going to talk about methods for measuring VUCA, because as valuable a concept as it may be, without being able to measure it and identify how it impacts individuals, particularly, and know what the depth and the intensity is, it doesn't really give us a lot to go by. After that, I will offer a method that I have identified for integrating VUCA into a diagnostic assessment when you're doing a psychological assessment to determine mental disorders. And finally, we're going to look at remediation strategies. We're going to look at ways to manage VUCA to help people get over the impact, and in fact, at the very end, even see if there are some positive factors to VUCA. So let's begin, okay? Let's start with volatility, okay? So volatility creates instability, circumstances change suddenly, requiring continual adaptation. So what are the psychological effects of volatility? Feeling out of control, emotional exhaustion, fear of future disruptions, okay? Those are just three, for example. Here are life circumstances that we're going to encounter. AI. AI is a profound factor now in people's work environments. AI can change job requirements overnight, okay? We encounter VUCA in people's finances and how they can afford to live, and when you find inflation raises food and housing costs unexpectedly, that can put an enormous strain on individuals' lives. And finally, different volatility in family life where sudden illness, divorce, or relocation disrupts routines. So as an example, a marketing professional learns that their firm is acquiring AI tools to replace many routine tasks. The team must rapidly acquire new competencies. The result is a sense of helplessness, and a loss of internal locus of control. I don't want to go into the concept of locus of control right now. We'll discuss it later. But let's just say it has much to do with the degree to which people feel they are in charge of their lives. Okay? Let's look at the next one. Uncertainty, not knowing what comes next. Okay? I've said people are off balance when they cannot accurately predict future events. If you think about that phrase, off balance, what I'm suggesting is that uncertainty disrupts the individual's homeostasis. The way they conduct their lives, the way they orient their lives. So, psychological effects, okay? Anxiety, rumination, sleep disturbance, reduced confidence in decision-making. Life circumstance. Well, for example, health concerns, right? Waiting for medical test results, or being involved in some treatment and wondering if it's going to succeed or not. Career, uncertainty affects graduates who don't know what their future employment opportunities are going to look like. And when it comes to relationships, when there's uncertainty about commitments or family stability, perhaps due to family conflicts and the like, all of those things can have a profound effect on how people manage. For example, a college student who's nearing graduation does not know what employment opportunities will be available, making it difficult, if not impossible, to decide where to live and how their family life is going to proceed. What are the results? Life is on hold, increased risk aversion, and avoidance of opportunities because you don't know which way things are going to go. Okay? Complexity, too many variables to consider. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward, but the effects are interesting. Obviously, one effect is cognitive overload, right? Where we just our brains cannot handle all the elements involved. But we also get decision fatigue. Now, decision fatigue is a fascinating concept, right? We are tired of making decisions. Well, what happens when a person is tired of making decisions? Well, one of two things happens. Either you get analysis paralysis, right? Where you just get into a feedback loop where you're just constantly analyzing and never coming to any conclusion, or the reduced concentration, and which leads to impulsivity and inattention. So when things get too complex, people just react without giving it any thought. Okay. Parenting. I've often said to clients that being a parent today is a whole lot harder than it was certainly 2 generations ago, because there's so many more things to balance in terms of what you're going to deal with. You're balancing education, you're dealing with tech, you're dealing with social development, which after COVID has been devastating to children, and safety, which is really much more of a concern in this generation than I think than it was 1 or 2 generations ago. In work environments, so complexity comes to the fore when you have to manage multiple projects, stakeholders, and deadlines at the same time. And again, all of these factors lead to those psychological effects, which can have a profound negative effect on a person's life. Parents determine how a child should use social media, has to weigh all of these different elements. And in the process of looking at so many different things, they lose sight of what exactly they're worried about, what exactly using social media is about, and what it is they're trying to establish between having their kids be connected to the virtual world while at the same time protecting their kids from the virtual world. Ambiguity. Okay. So ambiguity arises when information can be interpreted in multiple ways, right? Psychological effects, confusion, increased worry, misinterpretation of events, and reduced trust. Now, it's interesting. When I refer to trust, there are 2 kinds of trust that I'm identifying. One is trust in what you hear, what you learn, what you read, which has happened tremendously these days, and trust in your own judgment, trust in the ability to see things clearly and know what it is you should be doing. Communication, imprecise workplace instructions, or incongruent body language, right? What happens when the words and the music don't jive? When a person's comments, verbal communication is one thing, but their nonverbal communication is another. Which one do you follow? How do you understand the discrepancy? In social circumstances, you can have mixed messages regarding intimacy, expectations, and relationships. So, for example, a potential romantic partner expresses feelings of affection, but does not respond to texts in a timely manner. Okay. For my clients, who are, say, under the age of about 30, timely is measured in minutes, not in hours or days. So you have a situation where there is some sort of relationship growing, and yet the other person isn't responding almost instantaneously. And all of a sudden, well, is this really going on, or is there something happening that I don't know? Finally, hyperconnectivity. Okay. I can't stress enough how hyperconnectivity has created an enormous amount of strain. By some estimates, it's intensified all the other VUCA factors by an order of 10. Okay. It results in attention fragmentation, reduced focus, digital fatigue, increased anxiety, and FOMO. Okay. When it comes to life circumstances, the hyperconnectivity that we have today is so profound that there's virtually no opportunity to end the workday when you're always reachable. Back in the early part of COVID, Dr. Meyer and I put together a number of webinars to help people establish boundaries between work and home. In fact, the question that we posed was, do you work at home or do you live at the office? Right? Social media, that the hyperactivity involved in social media creates a constant comparison with others, which leads to self-doubt. And in relationships, development of FOMO. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. And anyone who has a teenager knows immediately what FOMO is about. So an example of the disruption of hyperconnectivity brought on by hyperconnectivity is the person who obsessively checks their emails, social media, news alerts throughout the day. So they're so embedded in their digital world that they really feel disconnected from their human world. And that leads to isolation and burnout. I want to, I don't know, Dr. Meyer can help me. Are we going to save all questions for the end, or is it
Yes.
okay?
Unless
All
you
questions.
prefer to have the question now, if there is now, we can make a first round of question.
So let me just identify the combined effects of VUCA, and then I can offer people the opportunity to ask questions if they want. Okay. So here we have a situation of a person experiencing job loss. Okay. And look at all the various ways that that experience is filtered through VUCA, right? Volatility, loss of employment, uncertainty, where am I going to have another job? Complexity, now in addition to all the things I have to manage, where am I going to get money? Ambiguity, you get advice about your career from all different sources that are conflicting, that are confusing. And finally, hyperconnectivity, where you're so bombarded by TMI, by too much information, that in and of itself becomes another source of stress. Dr. Meyer and I have really focused a great deal on the concept of agency, that when you are afflicted by conditions that diminish your capacity to function, it's diminishing your agency. Agency is the ability to make choices, take action, influence outcome, shapes one's future. Agency is very closely tied to the concept of an internal locus of control. And when you're under chronic VUCA, agency declines, helplessness increases, motivation decreases, and dependence increases. So these are all the ways that VUCA has a profound effect on the individual, losing their sense of control and their ability to determine their future. So I'm going to pause right now and ask if anyone has any questions. Feel free to step up and ask if there's anything I can clarify.
So
Yeah,
we continue.
Doctor,
Pardon?
yeah, I have a question. This is Rajneesh from India. Dr. Robert, as you talked about VUCA, do we see VUCA as a general terms, or do we have any timelines associated to it?
I'm sorry,
Because
if you
when
could,
we talk, yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that
am I
very well.
audible? Okay, okay,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that very well. Perhaps you could repeat it, speak up a little bit louder and
sure,
repeat.
sure. Yeah, I'll do that. So, well, I wanted to understand that regarding VUCA, is it seen as in general terms, or do we have any timeline associated with VUCA?
There are some
When I say
specific things.
time, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, there
specifically.
are some specific things that I will get into regarding VUCA for the individual, not just in general terms. Yes. Amit?
Yeah, so I am an Israeli wounded soldier from the war, and I think to myself how it can to help me in my day by day in the routine.
I'm glad you asked. I will get to the subject of remediation as well as how to measure how impactful VUCA is, because first we have to see how much of an effect it has on the individual, where it has that effect, and then we can offer some remediation strategies. But I will be presenting that. In fact, that's the next thing coming up.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. Now, let's talk about measuring VUCA. Okay. As I said, to make it useful, not as more than just a concept in the abstract, it has to be measurable. Okay. So one suggestion, one identification of how to measure VUCA is along these three dimensions. And think of a 5-point scale, 1 being not at all, 5 being constantly. Exposure, how much of the factor is present? Perceived impact, how much distress or disruption does the factor create? And the last 3, the adaptive capacity, how well can the person cope with it? Okay. So for example, for volatility, the exposure indicators would be frequency of major life changes, job changes, changes in relationship, right? The impact, what kind of stress level happens when plans change, the degree of emotional reactivity, and how hard is it to maintain routines. So I would say some sample statements that would be used to evaluate this would be, my daily life changes unexpectedly. I frequently have to adjust plans at short notice. Unexpected changes leave me feeling overwhelmed. So on a 5-point scale, if the answer to those statements would be a 1 or a 2, I think there's not much of an impact of volatility. On the other hand, if the answer to those statements would be 4 or 5, chances are that's going to have a pretty significant impact, and it would be something to identify as needing remediation. Okay. I've got the same sort of arrangement for uncertainty, the frequency of unforeseen events, the lack of complete information, the inability to forecast, okay? How much people experience those symptoms of anxiety, worry, need for clarity. And the sample questions here would be, I find it difficult when I do not know what happens next. Uncertainty causes me significant anxiety. I need answers before I can move forward. I mean, if you think about the last one, certainly taps in more than just uncertainty, but to a personality style that we'll talk about later. Complexity. So the exposure indicators are the number of competing demands, the multiple roles and responsibilities a person might have at any given time, and the interconnected decisions. How much you have to know from different sources in different places before you can make a decision. So here, there are too many things to consider about making decisions. My responsibilities feel overwhelming. I struggle to know where to focus my attention. Okay. So high numbered score for these sample statements would definitely indicate that complexity is a function that is disruptive. Ambiguity, as we mentioned, mixed messages, conflicting information, lack of clear expectations. I often receive conflicting information. Expectations are unclear. I struggle when there is no obvious right answer. And I think we find that more and more these days. Okay. Finally, hyperconnectivity. How much time do we spend online? How often do we check notifications? What kind of social media usage do we have, both in terms of content as well as frequency? And how much information consumption is there? We are not, I will acknowledge that my generation is not the generation of digital natives. We are strangers in a strange land, okay? When you talk to younger people, Gen Zers or millennials, you find the amount of time they spend online is staggering. It probably is almost most of their waking hours is spent online. So here for hyperconnectivity, sample questions would be, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of information I receive. I find it difficult to disconnect. Notification frequently interrupt my thinking. Okay. So here's what a matrix would look like incorporating a complete VUCA assessment. This is just a demonstration. It's just a demo. Okay. So for example, volatility, maybe there's a high exposure, moderate impact, but the coping capacity is high. That's great. Okay. Moderate. Again, this is just a demo. Now watch. This profile immediately identifies what kinds of interventions would be best. So, for example, high volatility and good coping, well, maybe we just have to monitor it. We don't really have to do anything. When you have high uncertainty and poor coping, well, now you might be considering some sort of anxiety-focused intervention like CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, or ACT. High complexity and high impact. Okay. Before you pursue any sort of, professional intervention, let's help this person develop some simplification strategies, which I'll go into a little bit later. High ambiguity, high impact. We've got a whole nother kind of strategies, clarification and metacognition training. High hyperconnectivity and high impact. Now we're talking about digital resilience. And when I talk about digital resilience, you're going to see what that incorporates. Okay. So here's a useful overarching principle. Volatility requires resilience. Uncertainty requires confidence. Complexity requires simplicity. Ambiguity requires clarity. Hyperconnectivity requires intentional attention. Right. Again, I'm going to ask anybody have any questions that they would like to ask now or save it for later. Okay.
Let's continue because we are already at 23 minutes.
Okay, fine. There is actually a scale that was created. It's the Perceived VUCA Exposure Scale. It was created by a PhD in management strategy, I think in Turkey. It's translated to English, so you could use it. It provides a quantitative score, interpretation, and recommendation for remediation. I'm not sure how well it's been validated, but it's certainly something you can pull up on the internet, and it might be of value. Okay. Now here's something that I wanted to pursue a little more specifically. Okay, and this is for therapists particularly. How do you merge VUCA with ICD-10? ICD-10 is the manual that identifies that classifies and gives descriptions to the mental disorders. Now, VUCA is not per se a cause of mental disorders, but you can identify them as the type of stressor to which a disorder may be especially sensitive. And when you look at the factors, you can see, for example, volatility, coping with change and instability, complexity, processing multiple demands. So let's take a look, if I could. Here's just this is a preliminary sort of concept, but here's one way that you might use it, okay? Anxiety disorders, okay? Anxiety disorders are the disorders of what if, whereas fear is all about what is, anxiety is all about what if something happens in one way. And there's this terrifying uncertainty about things. And what you're dealing with very often with clients is the intolerance of uncertainty. So if you did a VUCA assessment, you might find that for this client, volatility is relatively moderate. It's not a major effect. It's not a major issue. But uncertainty is very high and ambiguity is very high. Okay. So worrying about future events, seeking certainty where certainty is impossible, catastrophizing ambiguous situations. Okay. I've actually created a template for all disorders in the ICD-10, all the mental disorders in ICD-10. And if anybody is interested, I'd be happy to share it with them. I'm just using this as a model. And you can let me know whether you find it useful in working with clients of your own to incorporate the VUCA component into their treatment regimen. So I'm not going to go through every one. I have for OCD, for depressive disorder, for post-traumatic stress disorder, but It's not necessary to
The
go through.
PowerPoint will be added with a video on our website.
Or, excuse me. All right. Now, now we come to the part that people have been asking about. Okay. So now we've identified the factors and how they work. We've measured their influence and quality. We incorporate VUCA assessment into diagnostics. Now, what do we do? Okay, we know what VUCA is. Now, what do we do? For, excuse me, for volatility, what we want to help people do is create islands of stability. So how do you do that? Well, firstly, there are a number of practices of best practices to create stability. For example, having consistent routines, a morning routine, a sleep routine, having consistent routines. Regular exercise, because we know that exercise has a very positive effect on both mood and self-regulation. Family rituals, again, stability. It creates an anchor in a person's life. And contingency planning, whether it's for financial or for any other things where we have plans in place for certain circumstances that might arise. These create islands of stability. Okay. And the skills that you develop from these are emotional regulation, resiliency training. There is a program on stress inoculation that was created by Donald Meichenbaum many, many years ago, but it's extremely effective. And fundamentally, acceptance of change. Okay. Well, our goal is to increase flexibility without losing stability. The images that you see on the right, those are icons that we've taken from the MindEvoke PSI, MindEvoke Psychology Skills icons. And they relate to this concept of volatility, whether it's through positive thinking, internal locus of control, emotion versus reason. And the last one is hold. Now, hold is a concept, an idea that we developed to help people acquire a mind pause, the ability to hold off on impulsive, inattentive response and actually engage in a thought process that leads to positive and effective decision-making. Okay. A similar kind of concept with uncertainty. We help teach people to distinguish what they know versus what I don't know. Okay. One of the things that we have created, one of the things that we have helped people learn is the difference between a fact and a judgment. And unfortunately, through people's lives, we often are averse to fact and we are more likely to use judgment. Okay. I don't know if anybody remembers, this is an American icon by the name of Will Rogers. He was an entertainer during the Depression years. And he was very clever and he had some very clever sayings. And one of his sayings was, the problem is not what people don't know. The problem is what they know that just ain't so. So what we try to teach people is how to engage in the thought process that teaches them probability assessment, mindfulness, reality testing, and scenario planning. So for example, instead of asking, what if I lose my job? I want to know what brings me to that thought. How is it that I'm thinking along those lines, as opposed to, well, what will I do to cope if it happens? Okay. The difference between thoughts that lead you down a rabbit hole where you're lost versus thoughts that creates opportunity, that creates possibilities. When it comes to complexity, the goal is to reduce the cognitive load through simplification methods. There is something called the Eisenhower matrix, which is what you see on your right. And it's a matrix that identifies four cells. It's a very simple matrix. It's based on the concept of urgent and important. And you can identify tasks, you can identify things that you have to manage by identifying which cell they belong in. And there is high urgency and high importance. There is high urgency and low importance, low urgency, high importance. And of course, the last one is low urgency, low importance. And by identifying and prioritizing which cell your task or your activity belongs in, you can simplify the complexity that you are faced with. Ambiguity requires a whole different way of asking questions. Okay. A vague email from a supervisor. Okay. And you're now guessing about the message and wondering what exactly am I being asked to do? Well, the first and the simplest thing you can do is by identifying what exactly you're trying to get at. And by contacting or having a conversation with this supervisor, could you clarify what success would look like in this situation? This is using what we refer to as backward design, starting with the end, what it is I'm supposed to be doing, and working backwards from there. So by learning how to frame questions, and by learning how to frame what information you need, you can eliminate the ambiguity and you can focus on, in fact, what is the important things you're dealing with. Okay. Hyperconnectivity. This is incredibly important. We need to emphasize digital hygiene. And digital hygiene means what is the healthiest way to deal with technology and to deal with the risks of, or the dangers of hyperconnectivity. We need to schedule technology breaks, email batching, single tasking, notification reduction. These are all methodologies that we can talk about, if you wish, at length for reducing that impact of hyperconnectivity. As you can see, there are other kinds of effects, there are other kinds of interventions that we can use, including getting away from tech entirely, nature exposure, reflection time, mindfulness, deep work periods, ways to reconnect with oneself rather than being overwhelmed by the technology we are embedded in. Okay. The winning game is a tool that Dr. Meyer and I have recently worked on, both to accelerate the process of change, as well as to manage VUCA and increase resilience and agency. Essentially, what we've come to recognize is that the process of change really involves three questions. What do I want? Where am I now? How do I change? And what we've done is we've taken 5 icons from the entire set of the MindEvoke 90 icons, and we've placed them, identified them with each question as a way of achieving what you are trying to, how you can answer that question. Ultimately, the goal is to create that sense of agency and to be able to become resilient to VUCA and to the effects of VUCA and to the stresses of daily living.
8 more minutes.
Well, that's fine because I'm done. Okay. I want to end on a hopeful note. Okay. We've talked about all the negative effects of VUCA. Okay. But the fact of the matter is that people change through adversity. People adapt through adversity, and adversity can create opportunities for positive development. For example, volatility encourages adaptability, resilience, innovation, and rapid learning. Okay. Ambiguity encourages tolerance for multiple perspectives and flexible thinking. Okay. So we don't want to think of VUCA as only one negative pressure on our lives, but we want to try and take what VUCA generates, or I should say the adaptations that VUCA generates, and use it in our lives to make better selves. And that's ultimately the goal. But in order to do that, we really have to fully understand the impact of VUCA, how it operates, where it operates, in order to be able to see what it can do for us rather than what it can do against us. So at this point, I will stop and hear what people have to say.
Okay, so well, thank you so much for presenting this, because you've summarized these issues going on since the way, I mean, AI has been emerging. So there are so many uncertainties, and this is something which I guess the all the the people are going through this, and there's so much to learn. So I'm really happy, and I'm really thankful to you to present this. It is good that I'm a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your words.
All right, Dr.
Question.
Lebovits. So I have a question. First of all, are you
Dr. Joseph, maybe.
Yeah, it is. So my name is Dr. Wallach. I'm calling from Israel. From Israel. Do you prescribe, I guess, like a set, not only in terms of the VUCA assessment, but will there be almost like scripted questions to elicit specific answers to get clarity over the course of therapy, to find out impact, and also to guide a person to change how they're thinking? Because again, what we're talking about is trying to train the mind. So is it potentially almost have like a scripted set of questions that will be then almost like applied to each individual? Again, it will be almost like a fill in the blank, depending on the presenting issue, whether it's the volatility or the uncertainty, or the hyperconnectivity, where we can pull in from the individual, from their concerns and what they're presenting, in a very scripted manner, almost like where it would actually be like, if you remember, there was a program on computers in the early 80s, I think, called ELIZA, where it would ask you questions, and it was constantly just asking you questions, where we could almost then use AI, use the computer, use the technology to assist the therapist to cultivate a better sense, and also to train the individual to think differently.
So I will tell you that the first part of your question, in terms of a script, in terms of questions, if you look at the VUCA exposure scale, okay, you'll find that I guess it's Dr. Danner, really did a very good job. It is almost what you're describing. It's for every one of the VUCA factors, there's a series of statements or questions that you answer, and it will generate a score, and it will generate a what it called a remediation plan. Okay. And I would say that would be a great starting point. Okay. A great starting point for identifying, okay, these are your particular vulnerabilities. And now let's talk about how you can manage it, incorporating the various sorts of, how should I put it, resources available. Okay. We like to believe that our Mind Evoke PSI, the library of skills that are presented there, can become the basis for identifying a resilience program. We've used that with a number of people. That's been very, very effective. But again, the first thing is to identify which are the factors, the components that are most impactful, and start from there. So you could go there, like I said, you can download it from the computer, from Google it, and download it. And I found it to be remarkably worthwhile, surprisingly.
Much appreciated.
Sure.
I have a follow-up question. As somebody who's trained more as a CBT clinical clinician, as a clinical psychologist grounded in CBT, but also trained in EMDR, and trying to blend this in as a tool. Maybe this even gets to what Amit's question was earlier. How is there something where you could see where it would actually become, I guess, part of like maybe I guess like a framework for other therapies as well, not just for the Mind Evoke PSI, but where the Mind Evoke PSI then becomes like a launch point for then using other tools. And is that how you're using it yourself, where you're then leaning into other tools as part of this this approach?
So that's a great question. Let's look at the man within the system, okay? The person within the system, right? So you're working with someone who's experienced some severe trauma, okay? And you're working with them via EMDR, let's say, okay? The trauma has features, right? The trauma has, you can map, in a sense, the vulnerabilities and the disruptions and the areas of, the lacunae, the spaces that the trauma has created, right?
Correct.
And with that, you can sort of superimpose, okay, now let's superimpose VUCA. And what do you think this kind of experience would do with this set of, how should I put it, residual influences from the trauma? How do you think you might be affected by it, by this particular kind of experience, right? And so when you transpose those two things together, it really gives you a very, identifiable pathway. Okay, so this is what we're going to work on, right? This is how we're going to this is how we're going to change it or work on it, develop it, etc. Whatever we need, this is how we're going to remediate it. Now, what can we use? Well, I think, as I said, the Mind Evoke is a wonderful tool for keeping focus for many things. ACT is a wonderful tool, okay? But I would say the value of the VUCA, how should I put it, assessment is that it gives you greater definition and helps people know in advance, you know what? I'm walking into, I don't want to walk in with my eyes wide shut to a situation that's going to have really devastating effects on me. Does that make sense? Hello?
We are listening. We are there.
No, I'm asking Dr. Wallach if that makes sense.
Dr. Waller is muted.
It does. It makes sense. I had muted myself. I'm sorry. So yes, it makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
But I think, as Dr. Lebovits said, a big important element is internal versus external locus of control. So when any patient which is in external locus of control, what happened to me, why is it happening to me, all those questions and those doubts, we need to bring the person to be able to, a little bit, to put a seed of internal locus of control, which is, I see through definitely the process we have indicated, which is I see a possibility, a choice. The choice is very important because they are not in helpless self-learn helplessness, but they are in I see a possibility and I can do it because it's good for me. The moment the people are in that mode, they can function and they can crawl up of the problem where they are and they become resilient. But one of the elements is to really focus, number one, to remove the complexity of the VUCA case. And to remove the complexity, it's to come back to, is it an emotional element or is it a rational or is it, so we have a card, emotion versus reason. But the key is that the emotional conversation or the emotional expression of the client is totally limbic and it fly freeze. He cannot think. He does not have the capability to access the cortical reasoning. So what we do is to work with them to prevent them to stay blocked in the cortical conversation on the cortical situation and bring them to think, and to think through a question, and a question with a choice. Because at the moment that the people have to choose, they are not anymore in the limbic system. They are in the cortical system. And that is a very important tool. Do you agree with me, Dr. Lebovits?
Yes, very much. No, absolutely. And I think that, pardon me, establishing an internal locus of control is often a necessary requirement for being able to see choice. And if you don't see choice, you don't have choice.
And if you don't have choice, you are in the limbic and emotional.
Right.
Okay. Any other question?
Jerry, any question?
One of the few times in life that I actually don't. I think you covered the whole thing from beginning to end.
I hear Yael laughing. But
I'll tell you, I hope I conveyed the value of incorporating VUCA into the individual's, how shall I say, life space, not just a system or an organization or whatever, that it really is powerful for looking at people's own lives.
Yeah, absolutely, Dr.
Another
Robert.
tool we are using in VUCA or in PTSD is a tool we have developed, for example, in Israel, where people are in PTSD, in a situation like that. We ask them, what will you do when the war is over? What will you do new, different in your life? So the reasoning of the person is he survived the war. It's nice. Number two, the war is over. Feels good. And number three, he needs to decide what he wants to do different. And we have found that for the people who are involved, it prevents vicarious trauma. It prevents shared trauma for all the people who are first aid in trauma. But the tool is one of the tools on one of our strong cards that we have, which is destination. Because at the moment you look at your destination, you look in the future. You don't look in your back. And that comes from, so you don't have the problem you had before. You look at something in the future. Of course, if we bring you on a positive way of conversation. But you look in the future. Not only you look in the future, you are not looking back, and you are looking at something you like or you want to be. You have a goal now. If you follow that goal, you are not driving your life looking in the rear mirror. And you know, if you drive looking in your rear mirror, you have an accident. You need to look straight ahead. And when the people have the problem with PTSD or VUCA, they are looking at the problem, they are not looking at the solution. So another card we have is look at the solution, not at the problem. So the system is binary. And the system is binary to a point that we have a choice between a red door and a green door. All your problems are in the red door. All the solution is in the green door. And if you, as it's binary, if you see the problem, that's the key. We help you to see the opposite, which is a solution. Because if you don't see the opposite of something, you are dysfunctional. That's the way the tool that Dr. Lebovits was talking about, the card, not one card. The card come and different cards come together to reinforce each other. Is it clear what I said, Dr. Lebovits?
Pretty much.
So it's really looking at the future. And looking at the future, not being anxious. So it's really not being emotional at looking at the future, but making a choice, saying, I would like that. Okay. And we have a question in the chat.
Yes.
Is there any link we can access the VUCA scale?
Yes, I can I know where that link is. I have that.
You send it to us and we'll put it on the website.
Yes, I'll send it to you.
With a PowerPoint. With a PowerPoint.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Any other question? Now Dr. Leisman will say, I can put an helmet on the head and I will see what is the state of the person. Right, Jerry?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the brain and mind connection.
Last word, Robert, it was really enlightening. It was a take that it's pretty much the opposite side of what it is that I do, but it's the same thing. So it gave a complimentary take. Very, very informative, and thank you very much for.
You're very welcome. I appreciate what you're saying very, very well. And I think I think that's exactly what I was going for, to present the, so to speak, the envelope around the person.
And I want to add something. We started 3 years ago with the VUCA group. And I told Dr. Lebovits, we are working on a VUCA, a type of PTSD. Well, okay, it's social PTSD. Then we told him, it applies very well in corporate and human resource. Okay. And then he started to tell me, yeah, but how does that affect me on a personal level? I say, why don't you research and you present at the Reswell meeting? But before he made that research, he was not acquired that this is a VUCA situation. VUCA really exists. VUCA is something you need to recognize in psychology practice. And look now that he made the research and he communicated that to all of us very well, actually. You can realize that it is true that we are in a world of VUCA, and the people have a condition called a VUCA because it's more than one of the elements. The VUCA, in fact, is 5 pandemic. That's why it's called endemic. And it's the element which reinforce each other in a negative way. So that's why many people don't even understand the effect of VUCA. But after the demonstration of Dr. Lebovits, you can say you are affected a little bit or not of this or a little bit of that, but VUCA exists. VUCA is something which is, I would say, the white elephant, and that's what we have. And that's what our group is doing. Our group is like the little canary in the coal mine. We are saying something is happening, and yes, it's a VUCA. So, do we have any more questions? No.
Not
Well,
a
I guess.
question, just an appreciation. Dr. Meyer for arranging this, Dr. Lebovits for your presentation. I think that the ideas that were presented today, it's amazing that the concept, the VUCA concept, which existed, I think, 40 years ago, sort of fell by the wayside, and the field of psychology, especially clinical psychology, really didn't take advantage of something. And hopefully this will now be something that we can really see incorporated in as a clinician, but even in community levels, on a larger level, where we can really then examine and see how people are being impacted by what's going on, be these external sources of destabilization that are affecting everybody to a certain degree.
Absolutely. I completely agree with what you're saying. So unfortunately, the mental health fields have not engaged in a real appreciation for environmental factors. That's what VUCA is about, right? And the consequence is, there's a gaping hole. There's a big hole when a client says to you, okay, now you've told me all about my anxiety. Now what do I do? Well, until we help you understand what triggers you and what's going on in your life that's triggering you through VUCA, that's going to be a difficult thing for you to figure out. So yeah, I think I agree with you completely.
Many clients, I tell them it's not you. It's you have a problem to adapt to the environment around you. The society is sick. You are not the sick one. You are accommodated by the society. but that's the society which needs to be fixed. And it's very similar to the problem of environment. But what you say, Dr. Wallach, is VUCA, VUCA, no H, was created in 1964 when the Russian, at the Cold War, when the Russians have put nukes, nuclear nukes, in Cuba, ready to go to America, and particularly Florida. It was silent until came COVID, and COVID it was on booster and came back because of the H, because of the hyperconductivity. So if you look you search VUCA, you will find VUCA VUCA easily. But the VUCA VUCA-H have been promoted by our group for now 3 years, and it starts to be seen. But the H is a logarithmic multiplicator of the problem, because you get too much information. And if you look too much at the news, you get even more depressed. Next meeting, we will have the VUCA of sitting, the same way Dr. Lebovits have explained how VUCA is entering now in the cognitive psychology clinic. He will be speaking about the VUCA of sitting, because he will explore the science of sitting as a missing variable in human adaptation and for resilience and well-being. He's an expert, he's a chiropractor, he's an author, and he's an expert on the way you sit. Because if you don't sit well, you won't be able to think well. And he will explain us that next month, July 23, usual time. If nobody have any question, I will thank you very much for your presence. This will be put on our website, and you will have the video, the replay, and Dr. Lebovits' information about the VUCA scale. Thank you so much, Dr. Lebovits. Thank you so much. You did a great job. And it was really, really very well presented, so everybody can understand that it's not just VUCA, VUCA, VUCA. There is something there. We need to know more. Thank you so much, everybody.
Take
And
care.
it was
Thank
very nice. Thank
Thank you.